Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to My Abby Fences. It's great to be back once again with Dr. Alan Thornhill, who has agreed to join us and educate us a bit more again. So, thank you so much for joining us today. Lovely to have you. We apologize for a slight delay, but as you can imagine, it's a live event. Anything can happen, and this is what happened today. But we are definitely ready to give you some tips. I'm sure Alan is ready to share his expertise, his knowledge and experience with you. So thank you so much for joining. Hi, Alan. Great to have you back here. How are you? All good, I hope.
I'm good. Yes, we had a little technical hitch, as Caroline said, but we've fixed it. It's going to be a bit clunky, but don't worry. I'm used to. I go on stage quite a lot in my other life, so I'm used to things going a little bit wrong. So just bear with us if it feels a bit clunky in terms of the slides. I had some animations; they're gone now, but it shouldn't make any difference. The
Yeah,
message should still be the same.
of course, I'm sure of it. So thank you so much. And everyone, let us know if you can hear us so we can make sure. But I think everything is working perfectly. And we are here to discuss fertility coaching. Alan is the fertility coach and expert. He has done lots of work when it comes to fertility. So he is a great person to actually share his knowledge, as I've mentioned, and experience. And he's also the founder of Fertility Guy. If you haven't seen it yet, go ahead, check it out. And I know that he has lots of things to share. And I'm really looking forward to hear what you have prepared today. And remember, we will start with Alan's presentation so he can give you some of his tips, as I've mentioned. But of course, afterwards, your favorite part, Q&A session. So as always, please put those questions in the chat and Alan will definitely will be happy to answer them for you. So don't hesitate. Remember, it's all anonymous. So use this chance if there's anything on your mind, whether it's a question or comment, or you would like to share something. And this is a space for you to do that. So I hope that it will be interesting for you. I'm sure of it, actually. So don't hesitate. And of course, as always, thank you so much for joining. And I think that we can begin with our session. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah,
Ready?
please go for it. Yeah. And
Excellent.
I'm just gonna, if you in between slides, I'm going to be saying, next slide or click through or whatever. So yeah, just bear with us. So
Of course.
thanks very much. I'm really happy to be here. IVF fertility is a subject very close to my heart. Anyway, it's what I've done for most of my career. But then latterly, I suppose I've been doing it throughout my career, but latterly I'm actually, putting the badge on myself, labeling myself as a coach, because I'm really trying to help patients very specifically with their fertility journeys. But you might be asking yourself the question, what is it? You may already know. You may have already engaged a coach. You may have seen it already on the internet. You may think it's just a different version of life coaching, which perhaps it is. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it is. I'm also going to say a bit about what I don't think it is not. That's my personal opinion. It may not be held by everybody else, but that's certainly what I think. And I'm going to be, posing the question, why might you, it says I here, but I mean, that means you, why you might need it if you haven't already engaged with a coach. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is what we're going to cover today. I always start this kind of talk with a sort of bad news, good news type of thing, just to set the scene, let's say. Then we're going to talk about fertility coaching, kind of what it is, who might need it, why you might need it, a little bit about myself, because I want to, put myself in the picture of why I'm doing coaching and what might make me the right kind of coach for some people. And then I always like to give tips, because I think that's why people turn up to these sort of talks. They want to find out what's useful for them. And I can't guarantee that everything's going to be useful for everybody who's tuning in today. But I'm pretty confident that if you don't go away with at least one thing, well, I haven't done my job properly, but I would be surprised, because almost every conversation I have with any patient or potential patient, there's always something they say, oh, I didn't know that, or that's useful. And they take that away. And obviously for some people, it's a lot of different things. So, that's my job, is to try and deliver those things to you. And I can't know in advance what it is that you need to know. So I've got to give a kind of generic approach and hope that some of those things stick. And then I'll kind of pose the question, what are going to be your next steps? So if we move to the next slide, please. So bad news, sorry, there's always a bit of bad news. We need to sort of face some facts, and a lot of this stuff I'm sure you already know if you've already begun your fertility journey. But I'm convinced that these are the things that clinics particularly don't like to say. They don't really like to tell you the bad news so much. But it's very important to manage expectations for everybody's journey and in any part of life. So it's still a fact that really statistically more than half of all IVF cycles are unsuccessful. Put another way, you're more likely to fail than succeed, at least in the first cycle. So that's a really important thing to know before you embark on this. And that's not to put a downer on it; it's just to be realistic. If nothing else, I'm a realist. I like to be optimistic as well, but I think it's important to get a real dose of reality. This is a very well-known fact. There's a lot of science behind it, but I mean, even children know this, that fertility in women declines dramatically with age. So that's our kind of backdrop. That's one of the reasons why these IVF cycles are unsuccessful. It's probably the main reason, in fact. And then something a bit more on the emotional relationship side. There's quite a lot of data on this, and there's other bits of data. Couples are more likely to break up after failed IVF. So it does put a huge strain on the relationship. And when I say relationship, often people assume that just means one kind of relationship, heterosexual relationship, same-sex couple, but it can mean all sorts of relationships, not just the person, who you call your partner. IVF is very expensive. I don't think there's any real doubt about that. In most countries in the world, it's expensive. And most people need several cycles for the reasons listed above. So these are all part of that kind of expectation management. And another thing that maybe isn't obvious, but those of you who are attending clinics, you might have noticed it. But as someone who's myself as an insider, I'm definitely seeing this and I'm definitely hearing this. Clinics are getting busier and more business-like. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can mean that you don't always get what you want. And by that, I don't just mean the treatment and the success, the potential success. I mean the experience, and the experience is really important. This might seem like good news, but it can be bad news too. There are more clinics, more companies, and more information sources. And how that's difficult for you in many cases is because you've got to kind of navigate your way through that. So it's great that there's this availability of all this information and access to treatment, but it actually just makes your life kind of more difficult because you've got more choices. And I think a lot of the IVF journeys that I'm involved with come down to helping people make decisions about the various choices they have. Next slide, please. But of course, like anything, it's not all bad news, and this is just a selection of the bits of good news. Success rates improve. They seem to incrementally, slowly improve year on year. At least they should do. If they're not doing that in countries, then there's probably something going wrong. There are more treatment options. I know I'm sure we will have questions about what's a good treatment option, what's an add-on, all of that kind of stuff. But the fact that these extra things exist, I think, is a good thing on balance. The UK regulator, and I've got a lot of experience with the UK regulator, but I know that we have people viewing and listening in from other countries. So I don't want you to think this is all UK specific. It's absolutely not. But I just want to make the point that in many countries, including the UK, a regulator or governing body and guidelines that professional societies produce, so not the government, but professional societies, the people who actually really know what they're talking about, do kind of keep clinics honest. And I don't want to pitch myself against the clinics. I've worked in clinics for most of my career, but just to say, you need to know that you've got to be your own advocate in a way, and we'll come on to why a coach might help you do that, because clinics are becoming more businesslike. They need to meet certain targets, and you might get dragged along the way. So to keep them honest, regulation, guidelines, that can help. It's not the full answer, but it can help. But the reality is most clinic staff really do want the best for patients. I mean, I've not met many people in my career, and I've met a fraction of the number of people who actually staff clinics worldwide. But most people I meet, they're good people. They really want the best for patients, but they're under pressure. And so when clinics are busy, maybe you're not getting the best treatment. Maybe you're not getting the best care or concern, if you like. So although people want the best, it doesn't always mean they deliver the best. And that's again where you need to advocate for yourself. There are more and more funding and financing options available. So I've talked about it being expensive. Well, how do you pay for it? Well, there's lots of ways of doing that were weren't available, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that's a good thing. There is a lot of good, excellent, balanced information available, but you've got to be able to find it because there's a ton of information. We're in the information age, and there's so much information on everything. It's really hard to curate and work out what's the good information and what's not so good, and what's downright lies, because for every area of life, there's stuff where you go, well, I just definitely don't believe that. And if you're going through a fertility journey, you're in a kind of difficult and slightly vulnerable position where maybe you want to find information that suits what you believe, and you'll definitely find it, because there's all flavors of information out there, and it's not all curated or checked properly. And the other good bit of news is that there is a lot more focus on patient well-being. It may not always translate to you at the end, but there definitely is a focus on that. And there's a lot more focus on fertility coaching. And as you'll see in one of the next slides, there are a lot more coaches available today. Next slide, please. So what is it? I mean, there's no point talking about it for a long time, because I think when we talk about what services, let's say, are offered or what topics are covered, it will start to emerge what a fertility coach really is. But in its simplest form, you could say it's about supporting people on their journey to becoming parents. That's very vague, I understand that, but that's, so it's not all focused on IVF, because there's a lot more to become a parent than just IVF. We just tend to focus on that because that's one of the solutions. It's solutionizing, if you like. There are definitely many different styles of coaching, and I'm sure you're aware of that from the rest of life, not just a fertility journey. There's a lot of different types of coaching out there, and there's a lot of different types of coaches. So just saying a fertility coach doesn't necessarily mean they're all the same. Next slide, please. And the sort of topics, and I won't go into detail on any of them, I just putting there, and not an all-inclusive list. It's just to give you an idea. Some of the topics that people coach on, and I mean, I know some of this, I've seen some of this when I've done internet searches myself: nutrition, lifestyle, mindset, stress. But, and I'm sure all those things are important to all of you, because some of them you may already be doing, and some of them may almost certainly help with your fertility journey, and some of them may just be good for your life in general. What I would say, though, is, I've had quite a few clients who've said to me, Alan, don't talk to me about stress. We know about stress already. That doesn't make them experts, but doesn't make me an expert either. If you really are focused on one of those things, then I would probably advocate going to somebody who really specializes in that. But of the people who seem to gravitate towards me, they're not generally people saying, oh, I want you to help me with my diet. Perhaps because they took a look at me and said, he's not going to be able to help me with my diet. But I think they're looking to me as a coach for the things that I can bring to the table. And you're going to get this message from me. This is not about me and, I'm the only coach in town. Not at all. But you've got to find the person that works best for you, is the right thing for you. And so, those are all those sort of topics. But at the end of the day, most questions people come to me with are not about nutrition and so on. They're very specific, targeted questions about something along their journey. And they may touch upon that, and obviously I'll help them with that. But they don't tend to be, give me a course on how to get better nutrition for my fertility journey. Types of coaches. There are many different types. I would say the top two that I've got there, ex-patients and nurses, probably make up the bulk of coaches. I haven't done an analysis. That's my read when I've been sort of doing market research, if you like. There's a few doctors. I wouldn't say so many doctors. A growing number of embryologists, and as you'll see on one of the next slides, that's what I am by training, and a few counselors, and probably some other people too. And that might also influence the sort of person you want to work with. Next slide, please. So who am I? Very briefly, registered clinical scientist. So, definitely come out of the science mold, trained as a clinical embryologist. So worked in an IVF lab, and got more than 25 years of experience. And it's been in lots of different roles all around the IVF world, if you like. The reason I put this publications and scientific reviewer thing in is not to sort of say, oh, look how clever I am. It's to say, that's how I keep up to date with what's happening in the IVF world. Okay, so I had a question on a few webinars ago, and someone said, it's all very well saying, this piece of information isn't accurate, but how do we know you're up to date? Well, I'm very honest with people and say, I don't know everything. I'm not up to date on absolutely everything. But the fact that I write papers and read papers means that the sort of cutting edge stuff, I definitely know about it. And then I use my sort of scientific method to say, Is that credible? Is there enough evidence to support it? Can I give you a balanced view on it? That sort of thing. So that's why I put that down. As I say, lots of different roles, and I think that means I'm quite well-rounded. I'm not sort of focused on one particular element, and it's quite good to know all the different aspects of what has created our sort of IVF. I'm going to call it industry. I know some people think that's a dirty word, and in a way it is, but what our IVF industry has been created over decades, and it's got lots of different arms to it. And I think it's really important to understand, what drives the companies to want to sell things. There's that commercial pressure, there's academic interest, there's the clinical pressure, there's the regulatory part, there's ethical parts. So and I've been involved in all those different things. So I kind of see it from those sides. So when someone gives me a very specific question, I might say, yeah, well, the reason that's happening is it's not commercial, there's an ethical issue here. So, I like coming to the table with that rounded approach. I've worked in the US, actually lived in the US and worked there in IVF, mainly in the UK, but in many of my job roles, I've worked all over the world. So, that gives me that kind of global perspective that, IVF is not that the basics are done the same in every country, but the way it's implemented, the policies, the ethics, the laws, the regulations, they're quite different. So even if I don't know them, how could I possibly be up to date on everything? I'm aware that they might be different. So you might come with a question and say, well, in Brazil, this happens. How shall I tackle that? Okay, I don't know exactly, but these are the things you should worry about. These are the things you should concern yourself with. And although I'm now calling myself a coach, I guess I've been doing it for 25 years. People always came to me outside of work and said, I just want to have a chat with you about such and such. And they weren't looking for me to be their doctor or their embryologist. They were looking for insider information from, an objective view. Next slide, please. So, this is really before we get to the tips, this is the sort of nub of the whole talk is, why work with a fertility coach? What's wrong with the clinics? There's nothing wrong with the clinics. And I almost wish, although I love this job, I almost wish that I didn't have to exist. I almost wish that coaches didn't have to exist because everything was being done so well and so comprehensively by the clinics. And there are definitely clinics that do it a lot more than other clinics. But what I'm hearing from patients is, and I'm seeing it myself, is that it's becoming a little bit production line-esque, a bit like a factory. And if you get the result you want, you get the product you want, that's fantastic. But you also want to enjoy the experience. And if you don't succeed, and we know that a lot of cycles won't succeed, you want to feel like you had the best experience and it was done in the best way possible so that you can regroup and try and think of what to do next. And sadly, that isn't always the case. And otherwise, I wouldn't exist in this role, and neither would all my other colleagues doing fertility coaching. I think it's really important to be independent. I think you can be a sounding board. And when I say advice, it's not about giving recommendations so much. It's about leading someone to the solution that's best for them. And that requires guidance, coaching, accountability, making somebody have to actually accept they have to think about it. It's insider knowledge, I've already said that, but with an external perspective. And I think that's really, really critical. People want help in setting boundaries, and I've got a slide on that a bit later, and often decision-making. Again, it's not for me to say, oh, if I were you, I would do X. I say, how does that make you feel if you chose that decision? How does that make you feel? Now, if they say something that I think is, going to be definitely a problem for them, I'll say, perhaps we should rethink that. Let's go over that again. But I don't make decisions for people because I don't think people want that. And if they do, they're kind of, they're absolving themselves of responsibility. If it doesn't work, they're going to blame somebody else, and that isn't the best way to move forward. Something that should be interesting to people is that I think there's a very clear way to save time and often money by working with a coach, because they're giving you that insider view and saying, okay, watch out for these things. And I don't just mean add-ons, I mean all sorts of things, as you will see when we get to the finance slide. I've heard that some people don't like the word empowerment. It's become a bit overused, but I think it's still a powerful word that, people can take control back of their journey, because a lot of any kind of medicine, but particularly fertility, involves people kind of losing control a little bit, medicalizing something that used to be a very beautiful and natural thing to do. So taking control or getting some control back and being empowered is a really powerful thing. And reassurance. I've had, probably every single person I've worked with has said, can you just tell me, that thing that happened was normal? And I go, no, that's part of the normal thing. There's a range of outcomes, and that's one of the outcomes. And I would tell them if it was like, I've never heard of that before, you need to go back and ask. So reassurance is a big, big, big part of this. Next slide, please. So why might you need one? I'll read these out, but you could read them for yourself. But this is just a short list of the sort of things that people ask me. And if any of these resonate with you, if you're not already working with a coach, or you're not working with an advocate within the clinic, because it doesn't have to be an external coach, but it has to be someone who's got your back, when you've got one of those tricky questions. But if you're, even before you start the journey, I don't know what clinic to choose. I'm not happy about how things are going for various reasons. I don't understand why the treatment failed, because when treatment fails, sometimes you don't have much of a discussion. They just say, well, we'll try again, or we'll change that, we'll change one thing, and there's not much explanation. I'm not sure how long the journey is going to last. Well, we don't have crystal balls, and nobody knows that. And how will I afford it? I'm worried about my relationship with my partner and others. I'm overwhelmed by the amount of information. I'm pretty sure all of those things, everybody who's on a fertility journey where they need some help has experienced one or more of those things. And then I've said at the end, and I don't mean this in a brutal way, but a coach isn't your clinic nurse, doctor, or embryologist. We'll stick with that group first, because they're not independent. If you think about it, if things didn't go well in the clinic, you wanted to speak to somebody, it's quite hard to speak to someone who's in the clinic that provided that treatment and it didn't go well, or it didn't go the way it was supposed to have gone, because they're no longer independent. So I struggle with the independence of a coach within the clinic in which you're being treated. But maybe I'll be proved wrong at some point. And then friends and family. Of course, you need support from all of those people, but is it coaching? And I think when we get to personal boundaries, you'll see that friends and family are not always the best people to give you advice, because they sometimes step over the boundary that you may or may not have placed there already. Next slide, please. This is really important, though, because I haven't seen this on many sites of coaches. Maybe because people don't like saying negatives on their websites or in their literature. But I want to be really clear. I hope that I come across as a very transparent sort of person. I want to say, well, this is what I'm not going to do. Okay, so I'm not going to provide medical advice, treatment, or therapy, and I don't believe coaches should. Because I think that comes with not just the legal aspects. I think it comes with a huge amount of baggage to take that on. And with the best will in the world, how can I possibly understand and take in all of your, let's just use medical history as the example, and make the right, or help you make the right decision based on that. So it's not really about, being a sort of another doctor on the side, or another embryologist on the side, or another nurse on the side. So we shouldn't be providing advice, treatment, or therapy. I don't believe we should be recommending clinics for treatment. If I had £1 for every person who said, tell me which clinic to go to, and in the early days, I think I did. I think I said, oh, well, I know that one, and that's probably quite good. I don't do that anymore, because I don't really feel that's the right answer. And that's not me holding on to information. That's me saying that doesn't make me independent if I do that. And also, it's about making the right choice, the right clinic for you, not necessarily the so-called best clinic. And I have a slide on that. I don't make diagnoses or prescribe medications. That doesn't mean I won't question you to try and help you find, the questions to ask of your providers. But I'm not going to say, it must be this, and here's a certificate saying this is the problem. And then therapeutic mental health or relationship counseling. I'm not qualified to do that, but I think, when you spend enough time with someone digging into those issues, you are going to start seeing those things emerge. And then I feel it's my job to then say, I think you might need some help. Do we agree you might need some help? I've got some suggestions, but obviously you can find your own. So those are the things I don't do, but I think that still leaves a huge amount to do. Next slide, please. So let's get to the tips. And some of you, if you've ever heard me speak before, you might go, oh yeah, we've seen all this, but I'm perhaps notorious is the right word. I'm notorious for not really giving the same talk twice. I'm always updating. I'm always trying to put a new spin on to make it interesting for the listeners. So, tip number one, what do I need to know? You kind of do need to know stuff. Unfortunately, you can't be completely passive in the IVF journey or the fertility journey, because there is quite a lot of stuff to know. So it does pay to do your homework. You do need to kind of learn the IVF language, but you've probably heard that acronym before, KISS. Keep it simple, right? You don't need to become the world's expert on something, because you end up getting too hyper focused on certain details. And that's true for me as well. Things where I'm not an expert, I try to just keep it high level. You need to know enough to ask the right questions, because otherwise you'll get into the detail, into the weeds, and you'll kind of miss the bigger points, is my opinion. Avoid, when you're looking for information, avoid a kind of sales agenda. And by that, I mean, it's not that commercial entities don't provide good information. They do, but you've got to keep at the back of your mind that they are trying to sell something. And so often going to trusted sources like Mayo Clinic's a very trusted source. The NHS is a very trusted source. Doesn't mean that it's comprehensive, it's got everything, but what is there is usually very well balanced and well thought out. And expect to see, in all these different sites, a lot of the same information, because most of it is the same and most of it is accurate and honest and true. But I guess the devil's in the detail. It's in that 5 or 10% that's different between the sites, where those are probably where you're going to have most of your questions. Next slide, please. So this is a big one. I said about supporting people, reassuring, helping them find the right questions. I've put complaining, so asking questions, saying no, and complaining. But those are all things that I've had to deal with as a coach. So, what questions should I ask? That's number one. I'm sitting in a clinic and I'm being told, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. But because they haven't established boundaries, they want to say no to maybe one of those things. And I'm not saying, I'm the teacher of how to say no, because it's quite simple. It's no. But if you haven't established boundaries, or you haven't said, there's certain things I'm not happy about, it makes that a difficult conversation. And I completely get that. I'm not an IVF patient, but I'm a patient too in my life. And there are certain conversations that are quite hard to have. And I imagine when your fertility journey becomes medicalized, you've got a lot of questions and a lot of things where you might have to say no. And then complaining, I don't like that word, but when things haven't gone the way you expected them to, there's an element of that. Let's just call it complaining. And there's a good way to complain and a bad way to complain. And it's not about telling you off and saying you must do it this way. It's let's do it the way we're going to get the best result for you. And I've done that with a few patients now, where they've had a certain approach, and I've said, look, you can do whatever you like, but the insider knowledge tells me if you do it like this, I think you'll get good result. And generally we've got good results. They've either had the treatment option they wanted, or they've had some money back. I can't guarantee that, but I can certainly help you understand the way the clinic works. You have rights. You're the one who's signing the checks. If it's not funded treatment, you're the one who's paying for it. So you do have rights. And I think people sometimes forget that they're calling the shots. That doesn't mean you have to become the doctor and say, I want this, you need to do this treatment. But it does mean you have a lot of say in the journey. I think just like, in most areas of my life, particularly professionally, the clearer, the more concise you are and the more precise you are with language. And that includes, like in your Q&A today, it includes what, if I get sent an email, I always say, make it as clear as possible, because otherwise we'll both spend a lot of time trying to figure out what we're talking about. Be persistent. If you don't get an answer, don't just give up. Put it in writing. Always put it in writing, because there's your record right there. Go with a friend or family member, because then you've got this sort of independent person who says, well, I saw that, I heard that, and I don't just mean about negative things. I heard that because you were thinking about something else at the time. Clinics all have, or they should all have, a complaints process, but I would say try and resolve issues amicably at first, because sometimes when you go down the complaint/legal route, the doors slam shut, because that's an organization trying to protect itself, which it's allowed to do. So I'm just saying, if you want a result, sometimes it's better to do it a slightly different way. Be friendly and firm, but you do sometimes need to be the squeaky wheel. And that's not because, everyone's got it in for you. It's because they're busy getting on with other stuff. That's the sad reality. Next slide, please. And this is a biggie. I mean, I've got a whole separate webinar on this, and hopefully you'll come to that in, I think that's in a couple of months' time. Choosing the right clinic and treatment. And you notice I don't say best anymore, I say right. And if anyone catches me saying best, I should have some sort of forfeit I should do, because I don't think best means anything. Because if you think it means the best success rate, you have to look really carefully and say, would it be the best success rate for somebody with my particular characteristics? Because there are very few clinics in the world that deliver the so-called best success rate for everybody. They tend to have, certain demographics they're better at. You need to find these clinics. You need to use trusted resources, I would say, versus, of course, go to the clinic websites. But if you think the best way to compare clinics is to look at 5 different clinics and choose the one with the highest success rates, or choose the one that seems to have all the best things, you've suddenly forgotten that their job is to sell their services, and understandably, they're a business. That's not a criticism, that's just a reality. So they're going to put themselves in the best possible light, and that might not be the best thing for you. Are you staying in the I'm talking to you, obviously, patients in the UK here, but are you going to the UK or overseas? Or actually, I've been working with a couple who live in one country, not in the UK. They've traveled to other countries. So the same kind of principle applies. But going overseas is a big deal. It's very different, because you're leaving behind a lot of things that you perhaps take for granted that you're very comfortable with already. So that's a big one. And I know there's lots of good articles on that, but it isn't just about UK versus Europe. It's very global. I've put TripAdvisor, but I really mean rating schemes versus fact. There's been a lot of criticism of Trustpilot, TripAdvisor, and other types of schemes about how independent, how validated they are. So all I would say is, and this is what I would teach you, is about how to kind of use what you do when you pick something from Amazon or a restaurant. Use the same kind of principles to work out whether you kind of believe this star rating. Okay, I'm not saying they're all rubbish. I'm just saying it's not special because it's a clinic. It's the same kind of principle that you have to use. You need to understand success rates and, to some degree, compliance, because that's another tool you can use to work out what might be the right clinic for you. I would also try before you buy. Do a visit or a free virtual consult, because then you get a flavor of what the clinic's like. And the reason that little funny diagram is on the side is that's what I call the IVF funnel. I feel like before you really commit, you've got to do quite a lot of groundwork, and that stops you from falling into the funnel, because it's quite hard to climb out once you've gone into somebody's clinic and sort of started paying or started being treated. It's quite hard to climb out again. Okay, so that's what I mean about avoid falling into the funnel. Next slide, please. I need to move a bit quicker. And this is something I've shown before, and I'll do it very briefly. Where do I find factual, trusted information? Well, it's difficult, I'm not going to lie, but I said ideally a reputable, non-commercial source. I'm not saying that friends and family and bulletin boards and you just searching on Google or any other browser is not going to work. But I give this little example here where I searched best IVF clinic London on those 3 dates, and only one of them gave me an IVF clinic. Okay, and then I've updated it. Next slide, please. I've updated it. I just looked the other day. The second hit when I did exactly the same thing is this antibody. So it's, very, very random what comes up when you look for, and I don't think I could have used a more precise search term, best IVF clinic London. Next slide, please. And look, I'm not an expert on Google and search engine optimization, but I just want to make a point. Is SEO, search engine optimization, is it working for the companies? Is it working for you? Is it working against you? I would say on average, it's probably not working for you. It's based on a highly competitive world. It's effectively it can be a form of paid advertising, or a marketing team at a clinic or elsewhere could flood the internet with content to try and push themselves up the ratings. And of course, it's all about ratings, because if you're honest, you ask yourself the question, if you go searching for something, you don't usually look on the 10th page, you look on the first page mainly. And that's what SEO is all about. It's not always organic, because a a clinic or an institution has built a reputation in a certain way, those are the points above, or independent. And you've seen a random hit. That antibody was a bit of a random hit. You've seen a non-IVF clinic. There was an acupuncture clinic. I'm not criticizing any of these hits. I'm just saying it's not serving your purpose. There usually aren't NHS clinics there, and some of them are very good and have good success rates because they're not usually paying for this kind of optimization. And you might get a review site. Nothing wrong with the review site, but it's not a clinic. Next slide, please. And, you know, I always say to people, part of my whole thing, which maybe not everybody likes, is I want people to tune their BS detector. Okay. I want them to be skeptical. You can be skeptical about me as well. That's a good thing. All right. Because I want people to use all these techniques. I want them to sense check things. I want them to, when they're speaking to a healthcare provider, if it goes silent or they see body language they don't really like or they don't trust, you know, that's a sign. You need to listen to that. Contradicting information. I haven't got time to tell you a story about that, but I've got this little symbol is I've got a story for this. You need to use your gut instinct, because at the end of the day, that's kind of all you have, right? You don't have full information about everything. You have to trust yourself in these situations, and you've got to be comfortable. This is quite an intimate and potentially lengthy thing you're going to do. Are services free, or are they actually just included? You know, these are all words. They're all nuanced marketing words, and you have to start understanding that. And if something's too good to be true, well, you know the saying, it probably is. Next slide, please. Financing and understanding costs. Like I said, it's definitely improved. I mean, things have got more expensive, but the opportunity to find the money to get the treatment is definitely there in a way that it wasn't in the past. I would say, though, you should always be thinking, I'll plan for more than one cycle, even if you don't need it. Speak to a financial planner or advisor, because there are always going to be costs that you're not really anticipating. Pursue funding if you're eligible. Query things that you don't necessarily agree to or believe in, add-ons, and I would add in here non-routine medications. They don't usually fall under the add-on category, but they still should be questioned. Get a costed treatment plan. This is something that UK specific, but I'm sure it happens in other countries too. Clinics are required to do this as part of the regulations. So they're meant to tell you how much they think it's going to cost. Now, it is an estimate, but it's better than just going, come along and just give us your credit card and leave it at the desk and we'll figure it out later. And one little story, though, I do remember speaking to a couple and they swore blind that a particular clinic, I'm not going to name it, they said, oh no, that's the cheapest clinic in the country. And I said, I promise you that it's not. I'm not criticizing it. It's a very good clinic, but that it's the way the pricing is done that it makes it look like the IVF is the cheapest in the country. But as soon as you add all the other things that are almost certainly going to happen, it won't end up being the cheapest. And again, not a criticism. It's just go in with your eyes open. Consider multi-cycle packages, because they might, you know, that's a bit like buy one, get one free type of concept, because it might work better for you. And there's some money back plans and so-called guarantees on the market as well. And they can be useful because they can tell you a lot about what they think your chances are. So they can have a different kind of value as well as just the money part. And I know a couple that I've been working with who've had their money back. So I know it does work. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it's something to consider. And always, always, always consider the option of buying medications from pharmacy. I know that's quite commonplace now, but when I was in practice, it wasn't. And people spent a lot of money on medications unnecessarily, in my view. Next slide, please. We're nearly at the end and I'm looking forward to your questions. This is a really important one. I don't think I'd ever really considered this. It's one of those things that you don't always put a label on it. It just sort of happens. But setting personal boundaries, the more conversations I have, the more I realize that my clients have possibly not done this and they've suffered as a result because they've been given unsolicited advice and recommendations and comments from people very close to them, people they dearly love, but it was unnecessary and unwanted. And perhaps they should have said, look, I love you. I want you, I want your support during this, but I don't want you to tell me what you think about it, or I don't want you to give me advice, or I don't want you to recommend what I should do next, because it generally hasn't worked out well. I'm not saying it never does, but that's for you to decide. It's not for them to decide. So these boundaries can be physical, financial, medical, use of social media, who you communicate with. It can be a lot of different things. And there's some good articles on this. Self-auditing, to start with, you can say, what's most important to me? Is it communication? Just rate yourself 1 to 10. Say, this feels like a strong one. This feels like about an 8 or 9. I think that needs to be a priority for me. Clearly communicate whatever you decide to your friends, family, and importantly, the clinic. So, good example, I've had clients who've said, well, the clinic's now suggesting I do this. And I've said, well, okay, you need to put a boundary in place and say, I'll do certain things, but that feels like a step too far for me, or that's an intervention too far for me. But if they don't know, all they're trying to do is offer you what they think is the best idea, the best option. Make sure that you look after yourself and seek support, either from friends and family or a counsellor. And one thing I would say about boundaries is it's never too late to put a boundary in place. And also, you can change it. Be firm with your boundary. But if the environment changes, or you really have a mindset change, you can change it. You can be flexible. But start with a boundary. Next slide, please. We're nearly done. Keeping your relationship on track. I'm not the relationship guru or expert, but it's pretty obvious that the stats say that it puts a lot of pressure on people going through not just IVF, but fertility issues. You need to be aligned. I've met quite a few people where it was very clear that one of the partners, it was generally the man, but not always, was not on the same page and perhaps didn't want the same thing. So I know it's obvious, but that's something that I would say before you start spending money and going down this road, make sure you're aligned. That requires communication. That requires boundaries. I think, from my first slide, it does require understanding the process, because otherwise neither of you knows what you're getting in for. And when I say, I talked about this earlier, relationship doesn't just mean, 2 intimate partners. It can mean a wider relationship with family and friends. So all of these items, they do apply to kind of everybody in your orbit. But make sure you support each other and make sure you fully engage. Little story, and I put especially the man in situations where the partner is a man. But a really important anecdote I heard from a clinic was, somebody told me that a lady's whole treatment cycle was cancelled. So she'd been given drugs, she was on her way to having an egg collection. And the man had not done the semen analysis he'd promised. And so they cancelled the cycle. And that's a very clear, and it's such an easy thing to do. I'm not saying, everybody finds it easy, but I don't think that man thought it was difficult, just didn't get around to it. Well, for me, that's a lack of engagement. So, that's a really important one, to engage and show that kind of support. Next slide, please. So we've talked about a lot about choosing things, right? Well, you're now in a position where if you did want to use a coach, if you're not already, how do I choose the right one? Well, I don't have the answers. I've told you already that the number of coaches is growing. I think that's a good thing, but of course, it also means that's a lot of choice and more difficult decisions potentially. There's a lot online, and there's some in clinic now as well. They're all different flavors, different expertise and backgrounds, as I suggested at the beginning. I would say, though, there's no one size fits all. And I think that I would say at the moment, I think the 4 biggest things for me that you would want to consider are credibility. So, use that sense check and go, is this person credible? For the things I want, and it's all about the things you want, not what does the average person want? What do you want? Rapport, you've got to have a good rapport. So if any of you are listening to this and thinking, God, this guy talks too much, I don't really like his style, that's fine. I'm not so big-headed to say, I don't care if you don't like me. I mean, everyone wants to be liked, but I do understand that I might not be your cup of tea, and that's okay. All right. I want you to find the person that has a good rapport with you, and vice versa. Then you're going to get the best working relationship. You need to trust the person. You're going to be just like the clinic. You're going to be sharing a lot of information. And you want to know that person's kind of really on your side. And then I believe, maybe not everyone believes this, I think the person needs to be independent. So that's what I'm holding on to is my independence. One last thing I would say, though, and this isn't me trying to sell coaching, it really isn't, but I've not yet met a person or a couple who wouldn't have benefited from having a coach before they started treatment, by which I mean, some piece of information they've either shared with me that they've heard from someone else, or I've shared with them, has been useful to them. And I thought, I don't think you would have got that in the clinic, or you would have had to sift through a lot of other information to get to it. So that's my pitch for saying I think everybody should have a coach, honestly. Next slide, please. So you've got to ask yourself the question now, what will your next steps be if you're not already working with a coach? And next slide, please. And I would say wherever you are in your journey, I've talked about before you start treatment, another obvious place is you've had quite a few unsuccessful treatments and you're kind of like, well, what am I going to do next? And obviously I meet people in all of those different categories. I would say most coaches, I haven't done a survey, so I can't say, they'll speak to you for 20 minutes to an hour to kind of work out what's really going on, and you can use that to your advantage. That's like that free virtual consult. It's not exactly a consultation, and it varies according to the coach, but why not do that? And I would say if it's no obligation, you've got nothing to lose. Why wouldn't you do that? Yes, you'll lose 45 minutes or an hour or 20 minutes of your life. But who knows? You might learn one thing that is useful to take you forward. And I am very confident. I don't want to use the word guarantee, but I'm very close to using the word guarantee. I'm very confident that you would learn at least one thing, possibly many more things. Next slide, please. I think that's probably it. Thank you and good luck. There are lots of coaches available. Good luck with your journey if that's what you choose to do. Thank you very much. And let's get to the questions now.
Brilliant, as always. Thank you so much, Alan, for sharing your expertise here and, of course, all those tips. And I believe it was very useful for you and you found it valuable. So now we will go for your questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead, type those in. There are some questions ready, of course, but as I've mentioned, this is a safe space. You can definitely ask anything that's on your mind. Alan, are you ready for some of those questions?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good to hear that. Okay, let me go to the first question that we have here. And that would be, should I be looking for specific certification when choosing a fertility coach? And what should I look for? Which is a great question for sure.
It is
Recently,
a great question.
there are more and more fertility coaches out there. How to find the one that definitely has experience and of course has certifications, because that's important as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say it's a growing number, and it's obviously one of those things where, let's be honest, a lot of people are probably jumping onto it thinking, yeah, I could have a go at that. And
Yeah.
I don't blame them for thinking that. You could all be thinking that's what I'm doing too. That's where the credibility thing comes in. I do believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, there'll probably be a requirement for some sort of certification and accreditation. Yep. There isn't much at the moment, and I want to make a point because I've also done some other training. I'm not criticizing accreditation and certification. I used to run a diagnostic lab where we had the highest standard of accreditation. Okay, so I'm a big believer in standardization, accreditation, certification, but some sorts of certification are not as good as others. So that's not me saying that about coaching specifically, but just having a certificate does not necessarily mean you're a great coach, and it doesn't mean a lot necessarily. Yeah. But there are some good coaching certificates. They don't apply specifically to fertility. I don't have one at the moment, but I am working towards one because I think it's an important. I don't know if it's going to make me that much better. I think it will make me better, but I think it will also show that I'm willing to get that certification, that I'm willing to improve. And I think that's an important message you send people. But to give you a weird analogy, I was doing a course on becoming a wedding celebrant because I'd done some for friends where you go and help them do their wedding. And there's some courses online. And honestly, it was fun, but it was, I wouldn't call it kind of accreditation or certification. It was a little bit Mickey Mouse. And I think there will be some coaching courses that are like that too. So that's why I'm saying just be a little bit careful about going, somebody throws a certificate in front of you. I would spend the time listening to them, checking them out online, listening to them and going, does this person seem credible? Using all of my BS detector type stuff. You can do that on me as well. I mean, I'm happy to do that. I've been transparent with you. I don't have a certificate at the moment. I think, like I said, I think it's important, but I don't think it's everything.
Okay. I think that definitely clarifies that. Thank you so much. That an important question indeed, I think. So thanks so much for asking this. And okay, next question. So how can I choose a good fertility counselor?
Fertility coach or counselor?
Counselor. And actually, I
Oh,
think I
counsellor, sorry,
missed
yeah.
this. So is there, sorry, but before that, so
Is
is
there a
there a
difference?
difference between a fertility coach and a fertility consultant, right?
Oh,
Counselor.
okay. So we'll start with consultant. Yeah, actually,
Hmm.
let's do fertility coach, fertility counsellor, fertility consultant. The difference.
Okay.
So the true meaning of fertility consultant, if I'm understanding it correctly from the question, means a medical doctor, at a consultant level. So they've done lots of subspecialty training, who knows a lot about fertility and IVF. Of course, anybody can coach, right? Anybody can
Mhm.
help you find the right solution. But I hope in this talk I've kind of made the point that sometimes you're not in a position to coach because you're having to deliver certain types of information. All right. So generally speaking, I would say a fertility consultant who's a doctor is probably not doing a coaching job because they're having to say, this is what I need you to do. This is the treatment plan I've suggested for you. A counselor is a very specific thing. They usually do have particular credentials, particular courses and accreditations that they've done. And I think all clinics in the UK particularly have to provide access to one. They don't necessarily have an in-house one, but they have to provide access to one. And there are certain, I believe it would be useful for everyone going through IVF to have some sort of fertility counselling, because that sort of emotional support, it becomes more, it's usually considered more necessary when donor eggs and sperm are used, things like that, and that becomes a regulatory requirement as well. So a counsellor is a little bit different. They tend to be related to the emotional side of things, and I don't want to reduce them to that. I'm just saying they tend to be down that side particularly. A coach is a bit more broad. So as I said, they probably got, or it's good if they've got a lot of expertise in all of the areas. They understand some of the medical part, they understand some of the scientific part, they understand some of the relationship and emotional part, but they're not necessarily claiming to be an expert in that. And their job is to help you get to the place you need to be, which might be to go and see a counselor. It might be to go to another clinic. Like I said, when I put this is what I don't do, well, feel free to go to a coach who says, let me look at all your notes and I'll decide what drug you should be on. But to me, that's not a coach. They've now become your doctor or your nurse or
Mhm.
your embryologist. And so why are they not wearing that badge? That's my question. So I think that's the difference between them. I hope that's fairly clear.
Thank you so much. I think it's clear. Of course, if you have any follow-ups, you know what to do. And there are like 2 questions more. So if you would like to get some more answers, go ahead, type those in. And the question is, so what types of questions do you typically receive as a fertility coach?
Okay, I don't want to do that silly thing where I sort of go, oh, everything. But I'll just do the top sort of 10 that I can last
Mm-hmm.
remember.
Perfect.
Okay, doctor has suggested we're going overseas. Doctor has suggested we do these 2 different. I won't go into too many details. I wouldn't want to identify the person. Doctor suggested we do these 2 different methods of sperm collection, right? And so I didn't say no, don't do that. And I didn't just go, what do you want to do? I used my knowledge, I used my expertise, I used my scientific training, and I said, okay, let's talk about why they did that. What reason were you given for that? So that was, that was
Mhm. Makes
and
sense.
try and extrapolate that. It's not just about sperm collection. That question could have been about anything. I've been told I should do X. Again, not me saying, oh no, don't do that. Me saying, why have you been asked to do that? That's not standard. That's slightly different from normal. What was the reason given? What's the benefit to you? Is there any potential harm? How much will it cost? So then I've got this sort of package of questions that come around this difference. So although that's only one question type, it covers a lot of different questions. Which clinic should I go to? Where should I buy donor sperm from? Those are veering into that. Please recommend something for me. And I don't mean it brutally and nastily saying, oh, someone wants me to do the work for them. I'm happy to do work for people if they say, I would like you to do this, here's some money, do this for me. But I'm saying I don't even want to do that because I don't think that's the right solution for them. Because, if somebody says, I want you to pick the clinic, well, I've got a different set of values that I want from a clinic. They're not universal. For example, I'll give you a very good example. A lady might say to me after she's been to a clinic that she wasn't happy with, I say, why weren't you happy? And she said, oh, no, everybody was fine. But I didn't get the same consultant the whole way through. And I thought I was going to. You see what I mean? Something very, very specific. I don't know if I misread it on the website, but I thought the person who was always be there for my egg collection, transfer, every conversation would be the same doctor, but it wasn't. And that upset me, and it wasn't what I wanted. So you see how that's different from what's the best success rate. I'm not saying success rate and price and location isn't important. They're all important, but you need to have that list of, these are things I absolutely want. So that's a very common one. What's the clinic? What's the right? Well, they say what's best clinic, and I say let's reframe it. What's the right clinic for me? How should I complain? This hasn't gone well. What should I do next? Setting boundaries. I mean, pretty much, I'm sorry, I'm kind of repeating the talk in a way, but if you like the first 8 tips, they're the top 8 questions, essentially.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much indeed.
And one thing I can say is, so far, I've not had anybody, and maybe it's I repel those people, I don't know. I've not had anybody who said to me, can you tell me what diet I should be on? So,
okay. Thank you so much.
Not that it's not important.
All right. Thank you so much indeed. And now we will go to next question, and there are 2 messages, so let me just read it for you. So, is it necessary to have a fertility coach? If I had IVF and I never had one, I'm due to go for another IVF. I'm keen to have a fertility coach as I am that much older. My clinic also provides this. I guess some of the clinics cooperate nowadays with fertility coaches as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not here to tell you you need to do it. Okay. Even if I wasn't doing it as a business, I still wouldn't tell you have to do it unless I believed that some harm would come to you if you didn't do it. That's not the case. I'm just saying you need to, give yourself the best chance of not just success, but feeling like you were given the best support, feeling like you were comfortable enough to ask questions, all of the stuff that makes up a fertility journey. So that's why I recommend it. I don't think it might be more acute in certain people, but I don't think it's specific to people who haven't yet had a cycle, people who failed multiple cycles. I don't think it's specific to any of them. I think everybody can benefit, but possibly in different ways. Different things are more important to them at different stages, and people are different. So people have things that are more important to them than other people. So it's not a requirement. And then to address the thing about, because I don't want to make it sound like anybody who's working with a clinic, they're not independent. I just want you to have this in your head and consider it. Okay. So imagine things don't go well at a particular clinic, something you're not happy with. And, I would then say, how independent is that coach if they are sort of employed or contracted with that clinic? I might be wrong, but I can see there being a potential conflict of interest there. So conflict of interest doesn't mean it all goes badly. It just means it's something you have to consider. So that's why I put this big thing about independence on.
Okay, thank you so much. That's definitely important to note. Someone is typing, okay? So there might be another question, so let's give it a minute and see. And of course, as I mentioned, we will be slowly finishing. So if you have more questions, go ahead, type those in. We still have some time. And if not, we will be finishing, but let's still wait. Yeah, someone again is typing here. So let's see if it's another question or a thank you. And maybe as we are waiting for another question, let me perhaps invite everyone for our upcoming event on Tuesday. And actually, Alan is also part of this. So we would love to have you there. We will talk about PGTA. And as you know, this will happen on Tuesday at 7 p.m. London time. We have invited 3 different doctors, fertility experts, and Alan will be actually hosting this. So if this is something that you find interesting, then of course join us. You can sign up already, and the link is already in the chat. So go ahead and do it. Alan is, as I've mentioned, hosting this. This is an event which will also give you a chance to ask your questions. So don't hesitate, right? We already did 2 previous events like this. It was a great success with lots and lots of questions. So I can only encourage you to join us next week on Tuesday, 7 p.m. London time. And in the meantime, we did receive another question. Let me just go here. We're going to IVF clinic in the US we have been going, I think, for 16 months. I am 45 and wasting my time and money. Okay, we will contact you. Yeah, I guess anything else you can add to this, Alan?
Yeah, look, it's that whole thing. I'd love you to contact me, but you don't have to contact me. You can contact any fertility coach that you have screened using your own screening method, of course, because otherwise you could spend quite a lot of time finding different people. It sounds like you've already kind of decided that things aren't going well, and that's what we would explore together. Because there's no, some of this is I'm not diminishing your opinion, but if you feel like you're wasting time and money, then that needs to change, right? Of course, because nobody wants to feel like that. So that's what the discussion is about. It's like, well, how can we rectify that? I don't have a magic wand. I think you know that. Nobody has a magic wand, but it's about getting you back on a track that you're happy with. Okay, and that's all I'm trying to do. That's all I want to do.
Of course, thank you so much. And of course, you can get in touch with Alan. You can find his, actually, there is a profile on our website, and that way you can also get in touch with him. And I'll be more than happy to forward any of your messages to Alan. I'm sure he'll be happy to discuss it with you and take it further. And I think we will be finishing for today. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and your questions. And Alan, as always, it's great to have you. As I mentioned, Alan will be here on Tuesday as a host, but also there are some more events coming up next month. There will be another topic, so I will be happy to have you here, Alan, again. Before we finish, anything else you wish to add? As you can see, some thank yous are coming up your way for sure.
Well, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. I know your time is precious and you've got other things you could do and you could be searching for other things. So I really appreciate it. I hope it's been useful. That's all I ever want to do is be useful to people. If it's given you one thing, and that's what I want you to remember, is that if it's given you one thing, then you didn't waste your time. Okay, that's all you needed from tonight was one thing that was useful.
That sounds good for sure. And I can definitely say that it was really, really useful. Well, as always. So thanks so much and take care, everyone. Have a lovely evening. And of course, as I mentioned, I hope to see you back here quite soon as well. And I hope you have more questions. And there are definitely more topics that we like to explore. Alan, looking forward to our next event shortly. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.